environmental factors. And we're going to look at each one of those in the next couple slides. When we look at our health factors, we're looking for things like mental health conditions that could be depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, and so on. All of these can be can be contributing to a deteriorating state of our mental health. Other health factors could include serious or chronic health conditions like cancer, chronic pain, thinking about like arthritis or other types of chronic pain, or even serious head injuries. We're learning a lot from our professional athletes about how that head trauma can contribute to a deteriorating state of mental health or even lead to suicidal ideations. When we look at historical factors, we're looking for things like family history of suicide, family history of mental health conditions. We could be looking at childhood abuse. Think of your ACEs if you're familiar with that. Previous suicide attempts, or even a loss. Now, when we talk about this loss, it could be a suicide loss. It could be a other kind of loss. Maybe it's a personal friend, a relative, somebody that you knew, or maybe somebody you hardly knew at all, but for some reason has a profound impact on you. Environmental factors are those things around us, right? So it's everything from your workplace to your home to um, your drive home from your car to the people that you interact with on a daily basis. So and it's also things like access to lethal means, exposure to or contagion, and prolonged stress. I think we've all experienced prolonged stress. It's been a long 2+ years of this pandemic. And so we're feeling the pressures of that. Stressful life events like a divorce, a sudden death, loss of your job, so on and so forth. All of these things can impact your mental health. So when we put all of those things together, it creates this crisis situation, right? So that graph where all of those things overlapped, and right there in the middle, that's when things can get really out of control. And so, but what people often see is not the whole story, right? So when we see somebody in the media who maybe died by suicide, what we see is maybe Dustin lost his job, and then you see Dustin has ended his life. And so we think Dustin killed himself because he lost his job. And that's not exactly the whole story. Oftentimes what's going on is that that person is experiencing or maybe going through some kind of deep depression, and that depression is interfering with their work life, or their work life is making the depression worsened, and then they turn maybe to substance for coping mechanisms. And they all of these things start to compound and create a scenario where they are feeling hopelessness, pain, and despair and take their life. And so there's always more to the story than just what's on the surface. And so this right here is really like that the iceberg graph that we're probably all familiar with, right? So what you see on the surface is not the whole picture. Oftentimes under the water, there's this whole other dimension that we just don't see and we're not aware of. And that is the same for suicide. So often what you see portrayed in the media or in the newspaper or wherever is not the whole story. It's just the environmental factors. So we just want to bring that to your attention, that it's seldom what you see. It's always more. So all of this is helping us and encouraging us to do more in research. We're looking for things like biomarkers. Is there something that we can determine through a simple blood draw that's going to tell us that maybe this person's more at risk than that person? And if so, then how do we do more in the realm of intervention? How do we make our interventions better and more consistent or even culturally competent? Psychotherapies, what are we doing in that realm? How are we treating this through those psychotherapies and maybe even medication? There's some work that's being done. It's still in its very early stages and it's quite controversial. But ketamine, for instance, using ketamine to treat depression. Now, the research that's going into that is not just how can this drug benefit someone who's experiencing a mental health condition, but also how do we avoid creating another opioid crisis by introducing new medication that could potentially be addictive or harmful. So there's a lot being done in this research field. And again, that's where a lot of our funds go that we use, that we're using in our fundraising, right? We have had distributed more than $6 million in research over the last several years. Now we're going to talk about prevention, and then we have one more section, and then I can take your questions. But when we talk about prevention, we lead off with our protective factors. Protective factors are things like our mental health care, family and community support, problem-solving skills, and cultural and religious beliefs. All of these things can be strong. Well, let me back up. They can start to deteriorate if we don't take care of them, and there are also ways that other people can help us, because if you have this strong sense of family and community support, they're going to recognize the signs and symptoms when you're starting to feel less than or struggling with something, and then they can intervene. Your ability to problem solve is not only being able to see or know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but also anticipate that there are going to be obstacles in the way before you get to that end of the tunnel, right? So maybe that's a puddle or pothole, and knowing that that's there, what are you going to do before you get to that spot? Having a safety plan, your cultural and religious beliefs that encourage self-worth and value. And again, mental health care can be a number of things, and we'll talk about that over the next several slides. Mental health care is an important ingredient for suicide prevent or for preventing suicide. And you're going to hear that over and over and over again till the end of this presentation. But we've got to incorporate mental health care into everything that we do, especially within our work environments. We need a culture where everyone knows to be smart about mental health, meaning that it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay that you might have a bad day. So having those wellness days made available to us are really key ingredient to protecting our mental health. But also, again, just creating an environment where it's okay to talk about, where it's okay to discuss that maybe you're going through something, or you're using therapy as a way to get help and to get healthy again, or to stay healthy. All of these things are good. Being proactive about mental health means that we have to make this a priority. We have to see a doctor or a mental health professional when we need to, right? Just like when we get sick with a cold or the flu, there are some cases where we just have to go see a doctor. And the same can be said about our mental health. When we notice that our day-to-day is starting to be interrupted by how we're feeling and what we're experiencing, that's a sure sign that we need to go have an evaluation, which is the next bullet on this graph here. And discuss treatment options with your physician. So whether that's your primary care physician or a therapist or psychologist, you want to talk to them about your options. You just don't go into major surgery without talking to your doctors first about what are the other opportunities there. Is there another way to go about this? Or what does the aftercare look like? Really make sure that you're discussing these options with your physician. And if you're not comfortable speaking up for yourself, that you bring an advocate to speak for you, to help you. So whether that's your life partner or a friend, or someone who is just, that's their entire role, is to be your spokesperson, make sure that they're there with you too. And really, at the end of the day, there's no one way to treat mental health. It's about finding what works best for the individual and doing that as long as it keeps you safe and it's effective, right? So if you're safe and it's effective, we want you to do that. And that could be anything from maybe changing your diet to changing your environment to exercising more. And we'll talk about those things in self-care. Or maybe it's going to a therapist, or maybe it's taking medication, or maybe it's a combination of all of those things. Again, it's really about what works best for the individual. If your employer offers benefits, though the law requires insurance plans to cover mental health services, the same as your physical health services. And if you're unclear what those services are, I encourage you to reach out to your supervisors or your HR department to go over that, or even reach out to your providers directly to say, hey, I'm just curious, what are my options here? Which again leads us to self-care. And I love talking about self-care. I'm better at talking about it than doing it. And I think that's true for most of us. But self-care is a really great thing that we all can take time to do. It doesn't have to be major. You don't have to schedule it every day, but it's important that we incorporate this into our lives on a regular basis. And maybe that's just once a week, maybe it's once a day. It really is about measuring where you're at and what you're capable of doing. Our capacities limits have been really stretched over the last couple of years. So sometimes even thinking about self-care can bring on more stress, and that's not what we want. So really just kind of evaluate your day and your weeks and your months and figure out where can I comfortably fit this in if I'm not already doing something. That could be exercise. It doesn't mean going to a gym every day. It could mean just getting up, going for a walk, stretching a little bit. Um, Whatever it is to get more movement throughout your day. We sit so much. I'm keeping you in front of your screen for about an hour in a seated position for most of you. So you need to get up and you need to move. You need to stretch the body and just do things for yourself. A healthy diet, paying attention to what we eat. The example I like to give is a lot of times we live in this hustle and bustle environment. I have 3 kids and now they're starting to get into sports. And so sometimes it's really difficult to plan a healthy dinner. So McDonald's drive-through, here we go. And you feel a certain kind of way after you eat those types of food. And that's your body signaling to you, maybe that wasn't the best choice today. It was convenient, it tasted good, but your body is telling you do better, right? So trying to incorporate color into your diet, fruits and vegetables, drink more water, maybe less caffeine, and alcohol, and limiting our alcohol intake as well. The other thing is what we don't always think about is how we express our appetite when we're feeling some kind of way. I tend to overeat when I'm feeling down. Other people might lose their appetite altogether. Um, but it's really important to take notes of those things and how food is so strongly related to how we feel. Protecting our sleep, we have really long winter nights and long summer days, and we get really busy, especially as adults. So it's really not always easy to protect that sleep time. It's easier to just hit next episode on your Netflix series that you're binge watching. So pay attention, set some boundaries, try to protect those sleep habits or create healthy ones, and manage your stress. And that's probably, again, easier said than done. But a lot of times, stress management can just simply be a deep breath, breathing in and breathing out. Giving yourself that moment to process and to reset in whatever situation you're experiencing. Support for lost survivors and those with lived experience is critical. Again, if you've never lost someone to suicide, you really don't know what that feels like, and it's devastating for a lot of folks. Our board chair, she lost her mother to suicide more than 10 years ago. It's still extremely difficult for her to openly talk about, but she's come to a place in her life where she feels more comfortable and confident talking about it. But that doesn't mean that it still doesn't hurt or have a profound impact on her life. And so we want to rally around our lost survivors and make sure that they know that they're not alone and that they are supported and that we have a community of folks who can understand and relate what you're experiencing. The most important thing that you can put between a suicidal person and their way of ending their life is time. We want to, as quickly as those extreme moments can come on and feel like maybe they're never going to end, they will dissipate. And so we're going to learn in the next section really about how to give that person that time that they need for that intense, overwhelming feelings to subside so that we can lead and connect people to professional resources. Limiting access to means prevents suicide. So remember going back to that really restricted way of thinking or the blinders on, right? So we're singularly focused now. We're feeling this immense pain, and we want this pain to stop. And maybe we've thought about ending our lives to make this go away. And so when we limit means, there's really only plan A. So if someone has said to you that they're intending to use a firearm, if we remove the firearm from the situation, from accessibility, we can potentially save that life in that moment. And so it's really important to give them time and to get them into a safe space away from the means that they have chosen in that moment. Limiting access to means could be a number of things. These are just a few examples. It could be as simple as installing a CO sensor in a car. This will shut off the vehicle if the CO, the carbon monoxide, gets to a dangerous level. It'll just shut off the car. Barriers on bridges can not only reduce the risk of suicide, but lower the suicide rate for an entire region. We've seen this in San Francisco. The Golden Gate Bridge has been a mecca for many years for folks that have contemplated ending their life. There are barriers on the bridge. There are patrolmen on the bridge. There are signs with the 800 Lifeline number on it. And once those things started getting installed, they saw a drastic decrease in the suicide rate, not only in San Francisco, but for the entire state of California. Securing your firearms means, keeping them locked when they're not in use, right? And also maybe keeping the ammunition in a separate safe or in a separate area, buying yourself time. It could be means if you're contemplating suicide or having those ideations that someone else is holding on to your firearm for you until you're in a place where you can have it back. Blister packaging. This is one of my favorite things because more medications need to come in this form. And the way I like to explain it is if you've ever had the flu and you're not feeling well and you're just in this awful state, right? Like your body doesn't feel good, your mind doesn't feel good, and you need some medicine to help you treat your ailments. And so then you go for those NyQuil gel capsules. And on the back of them, there's this layer of plastic and this layer of foil. And it feels like it's nearly impossible to get just 2 gel capsules that you need for that 6-hour period, right? And what this is, it's not just a child safety mechanism, it's a time saving mechanism, right? Like it's delaying the process of you accessing something that could be potentially harmful or even lethal. And now think about your prescription medications. What format do they come in? Most will come in a little brown jar with a white lid that if you squeeze it just hard enough, it's going to pop right off. Now, these drugs can be harmful, they can be lethal, but they're easily accessible. So we want to advocate for more medications to come in that blister packaging form. This leads us to our last section, and then I'll be able to take your questions. We're doing pretty good on time here. What can you do, right? And this is what most people will come to this presentation for, is this last part. So it's really critical that now we engage in our best listening skills. So first and foremost, we want to have a conversation. We want to have a critical conversation with the person that we're concerned about the things that we are concerned about. We want to watch for the warning signs. We want to reach out to the individual and we want to help them get help. And then why would we have these conversations, or when would we have these conversations? When these warning signs start to present themselves. Everything that we've talked about before, those risk factors, those are over long periods of time. Now, these are short things that are telling us that something's wrong and something's going to happen in the very near future. So how are they talking? How are they acting? And what's their general mood like? What are they saying? Are they talking about ending their life? Are they talking about having no reason to live? Maybe they're talking about being a burden to others, like you guys will be better off without me. They're maybe talking about feeling trapped or expressing this unbearable pain. When we talk about behavior, we're looking for maybe increased use of drugs and alcohol. Maybe they like to have a good time from time to time, but now all of a sudden you're seeing this become an issue where they're using all the time. They're coping by suppressing their feelings with drugs and alcohol. They may have issues with sleeping, either sleeping too much or not sleeping at all, acting recklessly, doing things that they normally would not do. and withdrawing from activities, things that they normally would associate with that you would associate with that person. So if you have a company softball team and they're always part of it and they do it every year and they're really excited about it, and then this year they're just like, meh, I don't care, I'm not interested. Or, you normally get to talk to them regularly and now they don't want to talk anymore because they're isolating from their friends and their family. They might quite literally be looking ways to end their life or giving their possessions away or settling debts, right? Like this person, maybe they owe you 20 bucks from 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden they're like, hey, here's that 20 bucks. That's weird, right? It's been 20 years, so check in that moment. How are they acting? What's their mood? Are they showing signs of depression, apathy, like they just don't care about anything anymore? Maybe they're quick to rage or they're constantly irritated by everything. Impulsivity, like they're just quick to do stuff, humiliation or anxiety. All of these things can be signs that something's going on. Your people, whoever your people are, them, and it's normal behavior and it's not normal behavior. So you need to trust your gut in those moments. If you feel that this is causing you concern, that's a sure sign that you should check in with your person, whoever they are. Like, hey, I've noticed that you seem to be having trouble sleeping and you seem to be frustrated a lot more than normal. Is there anything you want to talk about? Could we go have coffee and just chat for a little bit? I'm happy to listen. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you assume that you're the only person who is going to talk to them, because oftentimes we talk to each other about what we're seeing and what we're worried about, but we seldom go to the person who we're actually concerned about. So it's really important to do that. When you reach out, you want to talk in private. You want to listen to their story. You want to express concern and caring and ask directly about suicidal thoughts. Remember when we were talking about that immense pain that's both physical and mental? You cannot ask the question, are you thinking of hurting yourself? A person that's experiencing pain does not want to hurt themselves. They want to make that pain stop. So you have to ask the question, are you thinking of ending your life? Have you thought of suicide? And then wait and listen. And if the answer is yes, of course, we want to stay with them. We want to encourage them to get to mental health help. That could be calling the Lifeline with them. That could be escorting them to a hospital or helping them make an appointment with their primary care physician or therapist. But we want to offer that support and make sure that they know that we're here to help them however they need us to help. We also want to avoid minimizing their feelings, avoid trying to convince them that life is worth living, and avoid advice to fix it. Now, all of this, you might be thinking, like, what does that even mean? Or why wouldn't we want to convince them that life is worth living? We're trying to tap into that part, right? In this moment, just think about how you've ever felt when you were particularly upset about something or you were stressed out about something, and then everybody wants to offer you advice, right? It doesn't always feel good. It's not always helpful. It's certainly meant well, but it doesn't always make us feel well in that moment. Um, if somebody was having a heart attack, we wouldn't tell them, oh, well, if you just eat fruits and vegetables, that's going to be good for your heart. And if you exercise every day, you wouldn't be having a heart attack right now. That's just the opposite of what we want to do. So when we think about our kids, especially, we unintentionally minimize their feelings by telling them things like, well, just snap out of it, or you'll get over it, or we've all felt that way before. Those things minimize their feelings. They make it feel like nobody wants to listen to them, and they make it feel like it's not okay to feel the way that they do. So just take a deep breath and try to listen more than you're talking in these moments. If you think that they might make an attempt, you definitely want to stay with them unless there's immediate danger to them or yourself. But stay with them, right? Like, don't just, oh my gosh, you want to kill yourself and then walk away. Like, that's not the end of the conversation. That's not the end of your involvement. Stay with them. Make sure that they have support. My nephew, last year, he ended up in the hospital after a suicide attempt. And his family, my sister, it was my stepsister's family, they really rallied around him. They made sure that someone was always there with him. when he came home, and not in like a hovering parent kind of way, but just in a very supportive way. Like, hey, I'm in the next room if you need anything, or I'm here for you. I'm just down the hall. But they just made sure that someone was always around to help support that individual. Again, help them secure or remove lethal means. This could mean that you hang on to a firearm or certain medications, or maybe we check them into a hospital because they need that kind of help, which would be escorting them to mental health services. It was just last November, a friend of mine called and said, um, I think I need to go to the hospital. And come to find out, they had ingested some medication, and I picked them up and I took them to the hospital and got them checked into Providence for some mental health help. And they've been on a treatment plan ever since, and it's been really, really great. So sometimes it's taking them to the hospital. If you have the ability to do a screenshot, this is a great time to do that. Um, you want to make sure that you know the suicide prevention lifeline number. It's 1-800-273-TALK. Now, many of you know, because you're in a communications company, that this number is going to be changing. July 16th, it will be a 3-digit number, 988. So it'll be even easier to access a system of care. If you're not much of a talker, you can always text the word talk to 741-741. Both of these services are available 24/7. If you're using a 907 number, you're going to be routed to an Alaska call center. If you're using an out-of-state area code, you'll be routed to the either an area call center from the state that the number originated from, or the first available person that's able to take your call. You do not have to be in crisis to call the Lifeline. Maybe you're just having a bad day and you don't know who to talk to. You can call them. Maybe you're curious about what can I do to help my friend who's struggling. You can call them. Or if you are in crisis, you definitely can give them a call. It's really important that we do that, and we're seeing a higher occurrence of folks calling in to these lines, which is fantastic. It means that that they're working and that people are receiving or getting connected to the resources that they need. If it's an emergency, meaning that there's a suicide in process, you definitely want to call 911. Depending on where you're at in the state, there may be a mobile intervention team or a crisis intervention team. If you're in Anchorage, you can request a crisis intervention officer come to the scene. If you're in Fairbanks, there is a mobile intervention team there that's been established, and we're working on creating more of a system of care and support throughout the state. And baby steps, it's called Crisis Now. You may have heard of it, but I encourage you to look into that further and to support that if that's something that you believe in. Together, we can create a culture that's smart about mental health and suicide prevention, because talk saves lives. I am going to stop sharing my screen if I can find the little thing. There it is. Okay, so I'm happy to take any of your questions at this point. It looks like we have maybe a little more than 10 minutes left. So are there any questions that I can help answer?
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I did have a question. Wondering if you seem like a younger guy. Could you share your career path story? You know, how you came to be in the position that you're in?
Yeah, for sure. So this was not a field that I ever saw myself in at all, to be honest with you. It is not what my background is. I went to school for communication and marketing, right? So that was like my focus, as I was going to do something like that. I found myself in media sales for almost well, it was more than a decade, working for the Anchorage Daily News, for the Alaska Dispatch, for other media outlets selling their advertisement. And then the opportunity came to work for the university in the athletic department, which led to a nonprofit development director position with the American Heart Association. And I worked there for 2.5 years organizing the Heart Run and the Heart Walk. And it was very compelling work, and I loved it very much. And the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention reached out to me through my profile on LinkedIn and said, "We're interested in your background and your skills, and we'd love to interview you." And I said, "No, thank you. Absolutely not. I don't want to work in that field. That sounds horrible." But I gave them some referrals to folks that I thought would be a good fit. And they came back to me a second time and said, "Dustin, unfortunately, those didn't work out. We're still very interested in you. Would you like to do this job?" And I said, "No, I don't want to do this job." Again, it sounds awful. Um, but I'm an Alaskan. I've been here since 1987, is when I moved up here with my family from Texas. And I have a strong desire to be a a good citizen in our community and to make a difference wherever possible. And after reading an article, an in-depth article that Alaska Public Media published about the suicide rates in Alaska and the fact that the statistics started at the age of 10, it broke my heart to think that there were young people in this world that felt that was an option for them. And so I told myself, if the AFSP called me again, that I would consider the opportunity. And sure enough, they did. So after the third reach out, I went through the interview process, which was pretty in depth, and secured the position. And I've been working in this field for 3 years in June. It's been really challenging, but very, very rewarding. It's not easy work, and I'm the only staff person for our agency, and I work exclusively with volunteers and community organizations like yours, and with individuals that represent those agencies. And so there's a lot to be done, and we need more volunteers. So if anybody's interested, please let me know, and I'm happy to walk you through that process.
Do you have any partners in Juneau?
We work really closely with the Juneau Suicide Prevention Coalition in NAMI Juneau. We also work very closely with the ABATA group, and I think that's like the Alaska Behavioral Health and Substance Abuse Program. And we do a ton of advocacy work out of Juneau. We do it mostly remotely from our homes, but we meet with the legislators often. We just received a national award for our advocacy efforts and collaborating with other agencies to extend our reach and to strengthen our voice. It's been really, really fantastic working with groups like that.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. If you could share how someone can become a volunteer.
Let's visit afsp.org/Alaska. That will take you to our local chapter page, and there is another tab there that says volunteer, and you can complete the volunteer application. Once we receive that, either myself or our board chair will reach out to you directly to coordinate like a small interview with you, just to learn more about you as a person and what your interests are and what areas of focus that we really need the most help in.
Do you know off the top of your head what areas do need the most help?
Yeah, programming. So doing presentations like this, it's really difficult to be one of, I think we have like 7 other volunteer trainers, but everybody has a day job. So sometimes it's really difficult to be able to recruit more presenters that can step away to do presentations like this. We do them online, we do them in schools. Other areas that we need help with are organizing our walks, help with our Survivor Day event that happens in November. This is a International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, where we have a community, almost like a peer support group day, where people who have lost someone to suicide come and gather. We watch a film, we have a group discussion, we do an activity, and we really build relationships amongst lost survivors. One of the most extreme areas that we need support with is connecting with lost survivors that are willing to go through a brief and free training on how to talk to other lost survivors. Oftentimes, folks will find AFSP because they've recently lost someone to suicide and they're looking for resources. And having someone to talk to who can relate to your experience is really, really helpful. It's a program called Healing Conversations, and I'm always happy to share that information and connect you with our coordinator.
Thank you.
Hi, Dustin. This is Bianca. I just wanted to express my gratitude for your time today and your efforts, not just with us, overall. This is such important work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll be zooming in tomorrow with the Fairbanks, the North Star Fairbanks Borough School District, and be meeting with middle school kids for 5 periods, and we'll be going over a similar program to this, but one that's catered to that audience. And again, that's another opportunity where if we had more volunteer presenters, you could be working with our youth who really need us right now. There is a national pandemic amongst our young people. We're seeing a higher occurrence of suicide attempts in those 12 to 14-year-olds. In Juneau, it was like a 40% increase. Bartlett Hospital's been very transparent about that. Other hospitals haven't been openly reporting those numbers, but we know that we're seeing higher instances of kids coming in for suicide attempts.
Yeah, I know in Juneau, that the age range, both my kids are in that age range. So, there have been children in our community that my kids have known, unfortunately. So we're small, so everybody knows everybody, or there's a very short degree of separation. So it's so sad.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any last thoughts or questions for Dustin today?
Thank you for sharing all the resources. It was really helpful, and I learned a lot of new information. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for saying that. I will leave it to Melissa to share my contact information with the group, but if you need additional resources or would like to talk to me more about AFSP or what you can do in your areas, feel free to reach out anytime, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Yeah, I will share that. And you were also very easy to find on the internet. How I found you.
I was like, I've made it possible.
Thank you so much for joining us today and speaking with our group. We are very grateful, and I hope that we all have some takeaways. And thank you again.
You're so welcome. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.